All right, what up, what up, what up? Welcome back to Pinoy News, man. I am here with Jason Moranchuk from 2-Bit Podcast. He has come up with an idea called civilizational capital, right? Which I think is absolutely a fascinating idea. And it's something that I wanted to discuss with him further. I hopped in his DMs and asked him, I was like, hey, do you mind if I use this and try to like start kind of working it out and putting it into like my stuff? And he was like, really, man, listen, it's an honorable thing to do. And so he's like, do you want to like, talk about it on the podcast? I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And we're here now. And I'm here with my boy TK Mal, who, he's one of the smartest guys on Discord. And I enjoy talking with him as well. Jason, man, thank you for being here today, man. It's appreciated.
Oh, but thanks for the invite. I'm always honored and humbled whenever anyone actually wants to talk to me. So it's the honor is all mine, man.
Yeah, man. So where'd you come up with this idea of civilizational capital?
Okay, so I'll start at the beginning. So there's a clip going around on X, a video of a woman in the Congo trying to cross this river, and she was crossing on like I'll call it a bridge, but it was like two pieces of flimsy wood. And she goes across the river and she falls in the river and stuff on her head flows away, and she has to wade across. And the caption above it was, the world has failed Congo. And I looked at that. I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think the world's failed Congo. I don't think Congo's failed Congo. I think that woman represents 10,000 years of living in the Congo, and that's just a different mindset from someone from the West. And this is kind of why all this aid programs, all these things aren't working, or are built to fail in some ways, because there are people who occupy a different frame than people in the West. So then I started thinking about terms, and I came up with the term primal frame for, that woman in the Congo, and a civil frame or a civilization frame for people like us. Now, the distinction here is that I don't believe the primal frame is necessary. The easy one is like the grass skirts, right? Like you think, okay, primal, tribal, that kind of thing. And there's a truth to that, but it can operate in civilization, because it's like there's a set of sort of characteristics that aren't tied to race or culture and all that, that are indicative of the two frames. So I would say in a primal frame, and again, these things can be useful in different circumstances. You take a bunch of us, you throw us in the Congo, suddenly we start operating on a primal frame because you kind of have to. The rustling in the bushes could be a rabbit or a tiger, and you got to know what it is, because if you guess wrong, you're fucked, right? So I'm looking at that situation, let's say with the bridge, and thinking, and I'm not saying this is a situation in that particular video, but just we can construct a pretty general narrative of saying like, well, yeah, look, in a civil frame, you just build a big giant wood, stone bridge or a metal bridge, and leave it there, and just maintain it, and then you'd always have a bridge. In a primal frame, you might opt to do the cheaper, more temporary bridge, because that river only flows for 3 months a year, and most of the time of the year it's not a problem. So you just kind of put something up there to use when you have to use it, and when it's no longer an issue, they just take the wood and repurpose it somewhere, because as you do, right? In a primal frame, it's basically almost zero time preference. Like everything's here. Your dangers are existential. They're, like I said with the tiger. Like you got to guess right. If you're thinking about it in terms of like video games, a primal frame is like a really small. Let's say you're playing Dark Souls, and a primal frame's got a very short health bar. One or two mistakes and you're done, and not just you, but your entire tribe is like wiped out. In a civilization frame, you have a much longer health bar, because you've built this civilization around people, which is protective. There's layers of this. If you want to think of the imagery of an acorn becoming a tree, well, instead of it becoming a tree, imagine if the acorn is nestled in the middle of the tree, and the tree kind of grows up around it. So the acorn always remains, the tribe always remains, but they have this civilization thing built up around it. So then all of a sudden you have multiple layers of defense when a threat comes in, you can start going, okay, wait, like what is this? How do we react? Let's consult the church, let's consult leadership, let's consult our histories, and we can integrate things in different ways, which is the benefit of the civil frame. I also think that once you start to introduce these two things to each other, they don't play well with each other. Primal frame people don't understand civilization stuff. Civilization people don't understand primal stuff. It's not a dialectic. It's like two separate things that are useful in their own context, but completely not congruent when put together. So if you introduce primal frame thinking into your civilization, it will erode and destroy your civilization. If you introduce civilization frame into a primal society or primal frame situation, people won't know what to do with it. They won't value it. It'll just go to crap, right? Because there's no mechanism in the primal frame to like do things like maintenance. It's just not like you only have so much human capital in that situation, so you have to like spend it wisely, invest it wisely. And in a primal frame, it's like, well, we don't build big giant cities. You build temporary housing, or things that are easy to build and easy to take apart. And if the jungle claims it, well, you just build another one, right? So that was where it started. And then I brought this idea to Matt Erickson over at his King Pill Discord in the voice chat, and we kind of worked out the theory a bit. And one of the things Matt and I kind of thought about was, I'll use this example. In terms of civilizations, everything starts with a tribe and ends at this civilization point. So the example I like to use is you take a fishing village in the Mediterranean who just gets really good at fishing, and they start getting really good at fishing in all ways and manners, right? So everything that's connected to fishing, fish marketing, boat building, all that kind of stuff. And as they get better and better and better, and they keep advancing, that fishing village can become the Portuguese. So what is that mechanism where you go from fishing village to the Portuguese who are colonizing Brazil and stuff like that? And I kept thinking about that issue, and what came to me was partly because of something that Nick Land, this guy who really kind of popularized accelerationism. People might have heard that term. He's a English philosopher, transhumanist kind of guy. Was pretty closely aligned with Curtis Yarvin during his Munch's Moldbug days.
I've read some Nick Land and stuff.
Yeah, he's hard, right? He's hard to digest. But one of the things he said that really stuck with me was the idea that capital is the result of human competency. It's more or less, it's that human competency generates capital. So the more capable people are, the more capital they will produce. I'll give you this example. The first airplane takes a lot of resources to build, right? It's a prototype. It's untested. It's going to cost a lot more to do. But as you keep doing it, and as you become more and more competent with building airplanes, it gets faster and actually cheaper over time. Like if you take the first airplane,
that's the economy of scale thing.
Exactly, but it's also the economy of human competency, because the more competent people become, the faster, more capable they are of developing this thing. You can see it in your own life, right? Like, with podcasting, when you first start out, you don't know how this works and is a mic on and all this other shit. And as you get more and more used to it and more competent with the mechanics of it, well, that goes away, and then you can concentrate on how to get better at other parts of it. So Nick Land, competency creates capital. Then I started thinking, well, that's what a civilization is. A civilization is just a vessel of human competency. And what it relies upon is this idea of civilization capital. And it's how you start with a human capital, which is time and attention. That develops into investing into things like the social domain, the economic domain, and the political domain. And those things have to be held together by a regio. And a regio is a region, a leadership or a king, uh, and a religion. And that's the thing. That's a regio is the thing that binds. So you have to have a strong regio in order to keep those three domains, the social, economic, and political, together. When you collapse the regio, or it's no longer functional, those three domains begin to go to war with each other or cannibalize each other, and because they can't, there's nothing holding them together. So their purpose is to generate capital, but so they keep doing that, but they will attack each other domain. So you can see that, let's say Hollywood, right? It's a social domain. It gets cannibalized, or it gets abused by both the political and the economic, and it's doing its own thing as well. So none of these things are working together. And that over time just destroys human competency until we get to this competency crisis where airplanes are falling from the fucking sky. And that actually puts us into a civilizational crisis. And that's where I'm saying that we don't live in a civilization anymore, because all those things that bind us is gone. So it's like being free agents
Well,
wandering around these cities.
well, actually, all right. So, I started off like all this like political thinking by reading Machiavelli, right?
Mhm.
I started off with the Prince. I went to his Art of War, and then I went to the Discourses on Levy, right? And when you go and you read the Discourses on Levy and understand like how the reason why Rome was, I mean, as amazing as Rome was back in the day, he said it all started with the geography, right? He
Mhm.
said, like what you want to have is you want to have a land where you have people, they have to work in order to get food, but like you don't want them to have to like, you know, like be fighting off winter every day. You know what I mean? Like you don't want them, you don't want them toiling too much, but on the same point, you don't want them to have food on the tree, right? Because people who have food on a tree just walking around, you know what I mean? Like there's food's everywhere. You're not going to end up building a proper civilization. And that led me to guys like Peter Zehan, and these are geopolitical philosophers, and then of course Curtis Yarvin, right? But the the geopolitical guys, right? The understanding that I ended up getting from them was like cultures come out of geographies, right? Because what you do all day is basically your culture and your economy. That's just what an economy is, right? The study of economics is just a study of what people do all day. And so when I hear a term like civilizational capital, and I heard it the first time from a couple of guys who were talking about libertarians. They said, well, why can't you take Ancapistan and put it in Somalia? Right. And it goes, it because like, they're black that they can't have like Ancapistan? No, it's not that. Right. It's the fact that like they don't have the long term, my government's going to do this every time, right? The people around me are going to do this every time, where I can trust that this is what's going to happen. And that's
Mhm.
that civilizational capital that ends up getting built up over a long period. Like you couldn't, like, nobody in Africa was going to end up coming up with, I mean, short of like Northern Africa, but like in Southern Africa, it's going to end up coming up like south of the desert. Like nobody was going to come up with the Constitution. Like none of them were just, sporadically going to create something of this nature. And the reason why it happened with us is because we have that, 3,000 years worth of civilizational capital, from the Greeks to the Romans to the French to the English to Germans, right? And all these type of things that ended up adding in and creating the capital to be able to understand that we have that trust in ourselves and our government and our laws that was going to happen. Right. And that was like, now it's a very, very fascinating idea. And I think one of the reasons why like we're cannibalizing ourselves is because this is an empire on a continent, right? Like in
Mhm.
any other time, like the United States would be considered an empire, right? Because like it's different geographies, it's supposed to be different people, different cultures, different dialects, and like if you would have let people kind of be like not so tied together, where we had like the interstate highway system and our economy forcing us into interacting constantly, you would have ended up having new languages pop up, all these type of things, and it would have turned into nations, like actual proper nations. And we didn't do that. And I see that as an issue. And one of the reasons why we're cannibalizing things is because we're just too big. Like, how does somebody in Montana, be able to keep track of what's going on in Hollywood and California?
Yeah, but I mean, but historically, so that's what I'm saying with the regio is the key part of this, right? Because historically, you've had empires that are way bigger than the American Empire, even. And unless you want to say the American Empire is essentially all the West. So I live in Australia.
Mm.
Technically, you could say that's part of the American Empire. Um, the the thing about it is it's that binding agent. When you have a strong binding agent, like with Rome, right? Well, for a long periods of Romans knew what who Romans were. Like the answer to the question, if I ask you, Tom, who are you, and you say I'm an American, I should be like, oh, okay, right? Like I suddenly know a lot about you, you know, by the presentation of your civilization and how it's generally presented, and knowing that all Americans, just of course differences and personas are different and all that's kind of thing, but in general, they adhere to this regio, they adhere to this collective identity, if you want to call it that. Um, and that presents itself. That civilization is representational of the citizen, and the citizen represents the civilization. So because it has this binding agent, so everyone knows who they are, and how they do. So one example I like to use is like the French and Italians. If you zoom out far enough, they're exactly the same, essentially, right? Both speak from a Latin root. They have food and wine cultures, geographically basically the same, with very very little
Same
differences.
climate, same,
Yeah,
yeah,
they share a mountain range, all this stuff, right?
yeah.
When you zoom close enough, they're radically different, and no one classically who's French or classically Italian would confuse the two, right? And that's not just a linguistic thing. Um, it's it's down to the person and how they understand reality.
It's a
One of the
culture.
things I Yeah, well, one of the things I say is that the ritual and reality are one. It's a it's a paradox.
Mhm.
So that which we rich so if you imagine everyone, you kind of use that example of zooming in, zooming out. I'm an Orthodox Christian. Um, the if you zoom out far enough, the differences between Orthodox Christianity and, let's say, Roman Catholicism are minor, right? You zoom in close enough, they're radically different. And what creates that differentiation, which we can get into if you want, um, is our rituals. Our rituals are different. It's not who we pray to and all those things, but we have different rituals, and that creates almost a separate reality. The Orthodox reality is different than the Roman Catholic reality, even though we're living in the same, let's
Yeah,
say, meta reality. So those rituals are what substantiate the reality, and the reality substantiates the rituals. And so it goes back and forth, right? It's chicken and egg. Um, when you get down to civilization stuff, that's that binding agent. The regio is held together by these rituals, so that, let's say, with Americans, it's like, well, you have Thanksgiving, you have these common holidays, you do the same things on those common holidays, you go to the same, let's say back in the day, you could go to the same churches or the same denomination, in general, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What has happened in the West is that the West has been built on liberalism, which is almost the political theory, the political, what I was saying, the formalization of Gnosticism, um, because it's all about going back to the one, to liberate yourself past this, this. In a weird, sick way, individualism is all about becoming is a way back to monadism, back to the one, to transcend our limitations and become gods. That's incumbent in within liberalism or nominalism or individualism, all these offshoots of these things.
yeah. I always say liberalism is the religion of the merchant class.
Sure, yeah,
That, that's
because
that's where
it
that's where
itemizes.
that's pretty much what it's like. I don't want to be tied to the community, the family. You go like the whole way to like Voltaire. It's I don't even want to be tied to the earth. Right. I
Right.
don't I don't want to be I don't want to be a human in the end of the day. Like that's literally how far liberalism goes to. Like I think Voltaire, he had that story about him being in Paris, and he said there was an earthquake in Paris, and he said, I don't want to recognize that the earthquake exists because I don't want the earth to have that much power over me. Right. It's silly. It's
Yeah. No,
nonsensical silliness, right?
yeah.
Yeah, and so
and
and
these
when I
guys and these guys are the geniuses, right? This is the genius. This you Voltaire is held up as one of the greatest minds of the Enlightenment period. And you're like, the fucker is that? What are you talking about? Like, fucking ignoring the earth because you don't like it. Like, this isn't Baskin Robbins, motherfucker. I don't give a shit what you like. Like, that's a lot. I moved to a beach town and I fucking hate the beach. Do you think I like a lot of things? Like, like I live in an area with cracked out fucking deer who are called kangaroo. Like, I don't like a lot of shit, but I'm here for a purpose. I'm here for a reason. So, like,
well, this is kind of the purpose, right? And so when I look at like I studied anthropology in college, right? And just the study of people as a whole and like how they operate inside of their geographic region. And this is where I get down to this idea of where you look at it and you look at people, the culture, like Thanksgiving is a harvest festival. That's what Thanksgiving is, right? And everybody in the world has a harvest festival. Anybody who, has, farming has a harvest festival, right? And how you celebrate that harvest festival is dependent on like what type of crops you have, like what time of year the crops come in, all these type of things. And so when you end up having a religion, the religion solidifies this on top of that, right? Because like your culture comes first. That comes from like your geography and how you live. If you're near an ocean or a river, you're going to have fishing and all these type of things inside of your culture. Much more boating, much more wrapped around the water. If you're in the mountains, you're going to be much more individualistic because like you're going to be kind of further away from people, but the people who you are close to are you're going to have real hard ties with. The Kurds, for instance, the Basques. I'm an Appalachian, right? Like my family's from Appalachia is where I was born and raised. So like you're going to have those really heavy duty family ties because you need each other and it's harder to live. If you're on the plains, much more stoic, where you're going to have a very long time preference because, you're planting and you're doing crops and animals, all this type of stuff, right? And so this, this idea of understanding like where all these cultures and things come from and understand how cultures form. Like we have been on this continent for what, 400 years, something like that. Nothing, no,
give or take, yeah.
16, 15, with the first landings on North America as a whole, right? Other than like Mexico, but like this in general here. We should have been forming cultures. We should have been, but like we didn't. Like what we did was we tried to like make this all into one thing. Right, as we expanded across the westward expansion, manifest destiny, all that stuff, whatever, right? And we did have a period up until 1900 where the West Coast was very isolated due to like the Panama Canal not being created, the interstate highway system didn't exist, we didn't have long-term transport, all these type of things. We should have these what you call regio, what I'm saying, I love the word Machiavelli, but like the culture as a whole, it should have been forming, right? We should have allowed like the things to be able to form and have that, and then understand that like we're going to go through a process of where you come through, you settle an area, empires form, empires fall, you turn into actual nations of people, and then you have that nation of people end up having those links to be able to survive long term. And in America, you don't have that. In America, it's a constant, you're an individual, you're only valuable based on like your productivity to the economy, right? And like you don't really care about what happens to the other people in the economy near you. Like no one cried when this is Yarvin's thing. No one cried when the people in in Chicago and the city right below it, I forget the name of it at the moment. I'm a little hungover, but like nobody cried when they lost their jobs back in the 80s and 90s when we shipped all the steel industry out and all the auto industry. Nobody cared.
Yeah, the Rust Belt, yeah.
Yeah, no one cared about them, right? You said, oh man, listen, just move. And this is kind of the problem is you have to care about like you have to have that idea of like, oh man, listen, some of us are hurting, all of us are hurting. That's how that works. Well, and we don't have that because we're too big.
Just to your point, so we have, if you go, anyone who's listening, go over to my go to 2-Bit Podcast on YouTube. There's a playlist called Civilizational Capital where Matt Erickson and I are reading Curtis Yarvin mentions Mulbug's Patchwork and combining it with this concept of civilization capital and seeing where these things are overlapping, because we're seeing a lot of current day moves that seem to be modeling itself after patchwork a lot more than anything else. You want to go check out things like Prospera, and there's a whole bunch of other uh, uh, projects like it cropping up all over Africa and a few other places, and they're basically like remaking cities. Like Prospera's in Honduras. Um, some people used to throw around the term smart cities. Trump has talked about having freedom cities, and they're kind of built on these precepts, but they're going right to the city. We're looking at it more from a ground level perspective of how we can do things, and we're looking at towns, because our going from the statement, you don't live in a civilization anymore, means that you're at zero. We're all at zero. We need to get to one, and the way we would get to one here is first we need to form a tribe. And I'm not saying you have to join my tribe or Matt's tribe or whatever that. You can build your own. It's fine, but you get your people together, um, whether it be in real life or online. And once you have that tribe developed, then you can start doing things, because then now you have a collective uh, uh, human capital group. So each individual person, or each itemized person, can only produce so much human capital in their lifetime. But together, suddenly now you have a bigger pool, and then from that pool you can start investing in. So what do we want to do? How do we want to spend our time and our attention? Like what do you want to do? Right. Some of the bitter white pills here is that the concept of human capital. I'll say this with capital. Capital isn't just money. We have gotten in our head capital is capitalism, business is money, that kind of thing. But we have these terms like social and political capital, but no one really, people use it, but they don't really know what it is, right? It's that metaphysic. It's that thing. It's a vibe. You know it when you have it. So in terms of developing skills and being able to utilize those skills and be able to invest your human capital into things, because I would say that that's what all humans have. You have time and you have attention. Technology is a thing that actually produces time. Like that's all technology essentially does, with a few exceptions. Airplanes just make travel faster, gives you more time. Um, Vacuum cleaners or robo vacuums gives you more time to do other things, right? Frees you up. Uh, that's the whole purpose of technology, essentially. So now we live in this, as we're moving to this heavy technological phase, where cities are going to be smart cities and all this stuff. You're going to have all this extra time theoretically, and you have attention. You can give your attention to anything you want, and whatever we give our attention to, we essentially worship. So you have to then start choosing, what are we worshiping? What are we giving our time and attention to? And in my thinking, the best thing we can do, since we no longer live in a civilization, is start to build one. This is a generational project. I maybe with this new technology and stuff, that and whatever investments, we can quicken the process. It may not take 500 years. It might only take 50 or whatever, right? But regardless of the time frame, I'm not thinking that I will see the end of it. I'm 47, so if I get another 30 years here, cool. But I don't think we can do it in 30. I don't think we can do it maybe even 100. But we can start the process. The process, I think, once you start it and you start it correctly, it begins to automate itself. And as long as people have something to invest in that's worthy and that's bigger than them, they will then start to build bigger and bigger things. Because there's René Girard, and you said you're into anthropology. You should probably check out Girard if you haven't already, or anyone listening to this should go check out René Girard. He's been massive in my way of thinking of a lot of things. René Girard posits a claim that all desires are external, that people don't know what to want until they see other people wanting it, either through a fictional character or a real person or whatever have you. And then they'll chase that thing. So and he posits the claim that the one true universal human desire is for transcendence. And you can see how liberalism takes that desire and does its own little, weird Gnostic jujitsu with it. I'm saying we reform it and take it for our own. And if what is transcendence, well, it's to start to build a civilization that will be bigger than you, you'll be long gone before it's even really in its fruition. And to and if we're saying, well, what do you model that on? And as a Christian, I'm looking at saying, well, we model it on the concept of the city of God. We model it towards that purpose, not because we're gods and not because we will build that thing. In fact, we'll probably build something that will fail, on a long enough time frame. I almost guarantee it. But it's a worthy thing to shoot for. And as long as we're shooting for that, whatever however close we get to it, will certainly be probably pretty good for at least a period of time until it gets corrupted and falls apart, and we have to do it again, right? But
Yeah,
that's the endeavor.
yeah, that's the way of all civilizations. The rise, fall. Growth. Growth. What is it? Birth, growth, maturation. Decline and death. That's just how all things operate. Um, and I was sitting here, and that's what I was wondering. Is like, what is the long term? Like, when if you wanted to build a civilization, like, what would it be? Right. That's kind of where my mental has been. So, like, what is good for human beings? Right. I think we got a pretty good idea about that at this point, right? You want human beings to have like decent food, decent water, exercise. You want them to be outside. You want them to be able to have decent families, communities, relationships. And I think you have to have reasons behind that. Um,
Hmm.
I think there's only like two people on the planet who have really actually figured this out. And I think it's like the Amish and probably like the Israelis who they pay their men to like just go and read the Torah, right?
Hmm.
Where like they just make their men stable and then women get with them. They have children and families and they have communities that are strong and stable. And it's not about it being prosperous, is the thing. And I think that's important to understand is that like it doesn't always have to be where like it's dynamic and able to like produce a lot of wealth and technology. I don't think that should be like what it is. I think it should be good for humans
Hmm.
as a thing. And I don't think what we're doing is good for humans. And we were talking about this before the show. I'm just like everybody out here in the chat. Like I said, I'm not a communist or a socialist or anything like that, but I talk about capitalism
I
because
just I just got accused of being a libertarian yesterday, which was weird because I was never libertarian. So I was like, someone was saying, throwing that as a pejorative. I'm like, it's like calling me gay. Like, I'm not gay, so the term means nothing to me.
Mm, mm.
Okay,
Yeah, but
sure,
like you have to be able to discuss like how we distribute
sure.
goods, right?
Yeah.
As a whole. And when it comes to capitalism, capitalism has a very hard time with negative value products, right? Or negative value things. Basically, like if you're a human being and you break your arm at work, capitalism doesn't really have a way to make money for that business that you broke your arm in, to be able to make money off of that, right? And
Hmm.
so they'll try to do everything they can to make sure that you don't break your arm, or if you do, they're not liable for it, right?
Hmm.
And so this idea of capitalism as a whole, it's been the system has been trying to grind down the parts of us that actually make us human and make us tribal piece by piece for the past 200 years. That's what it's been doing. And
Well, yeah, but I think just to cut in for a second, this is where it gets into that differentiation thing I said, right? There's a key thing about human beings that no system, no ideology can address. Capitalism, communism, everything else, right? Is that human beings, uh, it's like we're pattern seeking creatures. We're also differentiation seeking creatures. It's down to the idea of like, I used the example of this the other day. Like, this is a pen, right? We can define what a pen is. A pen is not a pencil. So by saying this, by having two things that one this thing is and one thing that this thing isn't, that's a differentiation. Now you can call this thing a pencil all you want, it doesn't matter. I know in the back of my head it's not a pencil, right? Or if you start calling this a pencil, then you have to figure out what you're going to call a pencil, right? Like, these things are down to the language. But in terms of human beings, we're always seeking to be different than each other on some level, because we recognize we are different, right? There are differences. And this idea of equality and all that stuff is trying to squash out differentiation from culture, individuals, people, whatever. It doesn't work. It can't work, right? So in terms of what capitalism's trying to do, is that it's at least in this late stage thing, is they're still caught in this like liberal mindset of liberating people from, let's say, even responsibility, so that the capitalists can say they're trying to liberate themselves from the conditions of the market, so have infinite money, right? Everything will always be prosperous, GDP go up, all that shit. um, it doesn't work because because you can't liberate yourself past certain points. Like there are hard things that are this is this and that is that, and that's it. When you get into the metaphysics of things, it gets it gets a bit more murkier, but we can start seeing the downstream effect of all that stuff. That people aren't numbers, numbers aren't people. Like you can't confuse the two, and when you're trying to combine them and only see people as numbers, it doesn't work. Or numbers as people, it doesn't work. Right? It's foundational to our uh, in 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 Orthodoxy we say it's the nous, right? Like our capability to receive the logos, to understand the world, right? To put it in its proper place, right? The different terms for it, but I'll sketch it out. That's fundamental to us. Like you can't fuck with it. When you fuck with it, you just get the Soviet Union, or you get where the fuck we are right now, right? There's only so many things you can do until these things are to flatline. Sorry, I wanted to get into there because I think
yeah. Well,
yeah,
what
because I think people get hung up on those like capitalism, communism. Yeah, it's all bad at some point.
like they're just ways of distributing goods in the end of the day, right? And that's once you get away from the idea of like this is all just this is how you're forming a market. Like, and this is the problem with like libertarianism, like as a whole, and the anarcho-capital thing, right? It's you really can't your government always sets a market, right? Because they make the rules. Like, for instance, you're not allowed to sell like humans, right? You know what I mean? Or you're not allowed to sell like organs. And we're all probably pretty cool about like a lot of these type of like bigger rules, I mean, like fundamentally, where it's like, you're not allowed just to go steal things. You're not allowed to, when you arbitrate, you want to be able to have two people who are going to work together, and you're going to have an arbitrator, which is, again, that's the government. That's what all these things are. Mm-hmm. And these are important concepts for people to really get, because they don't really understand that, like whatever. Anyway, back to the point. The point is that you're supposed to have something that stops you and your culture, in your tribe, and your people from taking advantage of each other and allowing the system to wear you down, right? And change who you are fundamentally. Like the reason why you end up having like all these kids running around today, want to like cut their penises off or wear blue hair, or they want to be the opposite gender, right? Is because like the system, the corporate office where like you live most of your life as an adult, if you go get a degree, you're going to end up not needing your genitals in that place, right? So they want you to be androgynous. They want you to stand here and be, they want you to be like just a good consumer and a worker who shows up every day. They don't want you to have a family, because that family means that you're going to take time off from work to deal with them, and you're not going to be focused completely on your job. This is the type of stuff. But like, you have to have that cultural background, and this is where this like civilizational capital thing I really love about this civilizational like foundation of who your people are and what's important to y'all, and those values, right, that are important. And the bigger you make like your civilization, like a larger like geographic space, the more people you have, the easier it is for like these type of systems to wear individuals down, and families and like communities, because you don't really care about each other because there's too many of you.
Yeah, the only other way you can deal with it is being super authoritarian. So I use the example of Singapore quite often, but I'm not advocating Singapore or anything like that. No. But I look at it. I'm curious with it, because you have dominant within Singapore. You have three different groups, right? You have Chinese, East Indians, and Muslims all living together, and in essentially a city state, which is very prosperous. But they have really draconian, as we would say, laws. Like in terms of you litter, they'll take you into the street, they'll arrest you, put you in the middle of the street, and cane you in public. And it's things like that, or death penalty for more severe crimes. What they've been able to do, however, is get rid of things like rape. Like their rape statistics, if you look it up, is like basically non-existence. Right. The only crime that's apparently a bit of a problem in Singapore is like online scams. But other than that, low crime rates, like all of it. And you look at pictures of Singapore, and it's beautiful, and it's modern, and it's a civilization, right? Now, I'm not saying that we have to live in a Singapore authoritarian model, but maybe if you want to have this multicultural thing, if you want to have, I think the biggest problem we have in the West is that we want our cake and eat it too. We want all these nice, wonderful sounding theory things. We never want to deal with the consequences. And when you point out the consequences, like Thomas Sowell's been pointing out the consequences for freaking 50 years, and no one listens to him. But yet, all of a sudden, you see all the things he was saying back in 1975 come to fruition. And it's like, how did this thing happen? It's like, because you're not taking responsibility for these things. Like, you can see the problems or the consequences of your actions before as you're doing them, and you've ignored it and let it happen. And now you're in a position where things are, getting bad to worse. Like, look at this. Everyone's talking about Haiti right now. Cannibal.
Oh my God. Like, listen, I'm such a fan of barbecue. I want barbecue to be a world leader. I so badly want barbecue at the UN. Right? So, like, I am barbecue. Like, you will listen to me. Like, I want that to happen. Like, just for clown world, just for the lulz. I want
some
that
guys to the new ambassador showing with human heads on his belt.
I want it. You
necklace full of ears,
with a motorcycle with his vest. Right?
Just fucking so Mad Max.
I love
it. But you look at that, right? And Haiti has been a prime example. Like, I just been doing. I'm writing about this thing called The Vengeful Son, which maybe we can get into a little bit if you want to, but because it's part of this. But reading that, looking back into the revolutionary spirit, there was this moment in 1848 where the liberals of the day were basically trying to do what they did in World War One. Like, get rid of the monarchy, take over the governments, put in suffrages and all this stuff. And a few big test cases. One was Haiti, where they, went in and liberated and modernized and made Haiti a liberal society. And it's been a complete fucking disaster. My entire lifetime, whenever you heard something bad happening, it was probably Haiti. Like mudslides, like spontaneous, riots,
earthquakes.
Now we have cannibal gangs. Like, that's new, but what the fuck? Like, I remember, I'm old enough to remember when Donald Trump called it a shithole country, and everyone was like, oh, and all the late night hosts were going to Haiti and showing what a lovely paradise it is. And like, I've talked to Haitians, man. I come from Montreal, Canada. We have a big Haitian community. I've been friends with Haitians. I've talked to them. You know what they would say? Haiti's a shithole country, like from Papa Doc on down.
I mean,
so
like,
what are we doing?
All right, so you also, like, Haiti doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? Like, the French have just been raping that place for
100%,
200 years.
No. Here's my point, man. Is that introducing a civil frame to a society that is probably going to be much more better off in a primal frame, without like this taking the necessary steps, right, to slowly introduce, like, this is what Christendom did, right? You send in the priests, they talk to people, they get this thing where, like, hey, let's stop doing human sacrifice, stop eating people, and they're like, what? Like, yeah, don't eat people anymore. And like, okay, and then they start doing that, and then they slowly progress, right? Like, that has been the way that Christendom was very effective for thousands of years. Didn't do that anymore, right? With Haiti, we just said, no, here's liberal democracy, deal with it, right? It doesn't work, and it's cruel. It's a cruelty to these people, to go to them and go, well, we're just going to give you, here's a UN charter, here's a constitution, here's some buildings, deal with it. It's been a disaster in post-apartheid South Africa. Right. I'm not saying apartheid was great. I'm not saying that South Africans should go back to apartheid. But I'm like, obviously something's not working. Right. And it's not money, and it's not the government buildings. They have all those things. So why isn't that working? Well, there's got to be something else going on. Psychologically.
All right. So, like, and this is kind of why you have to have purposes behind things, right? And this is why, like, I talk about, like, the Amish and things of this nature. Like, why are the Amish so successful, peaceful, and, I mean, like, they're never in the news, other than, like, every once in a while, like, you hear, oh man, some of their raw milk that they sell, made people sick somewhere or whatever, right?
They're really good drug mules, apparently, though, too. They do a lot of drug muling. Yeah.
Right. But, like, the problem that they have, right, is that or what the Amish do is they give a reason for you to be able to be in this society peacefully because they keep you busy, right? You don't have all these modern technological things that allow you to have that free time to go do nonsense, right? You go, hey, look, you have to go farm your field. You have to go till. You have to go feed these animals. You have to stand here and go to work. You have to do all this stuff in order to like be able to just survive. And this is what ended up happening with our family structure in the West is we stood here and we gave women, you know, I mean, washers and dryers and dishwashers and refrigerators and grocery stores, all this stuff. All of a sudden, that woman that used to be very, very like important to you, right, where you needed her. And it wasn't just like, oh, I wanted to have her around because of vagina. No, it was you needed her. She cooked. She went and got water. She did the lawn. She washed the clothes. It took her 8-10 hours a day to do work. And you appreciated her for doing all this. All of a sudden, now you as a dude and her as a woman, you can both get all these chores done by yourselves individually in 45 minutes. Like, what is the purpose now? You don't have a reason to have these.
Raising kids. This is why they're going after kids. Well, this is why I say liberalism essentially is a civilization killer. Because again, this is idea of liberating yourself from terms, right? From roles and obligations, from duties. Like the duty of a husband and wife. I've been married. We just celebrated 9 years together.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And okay, let's put it this way. Your marriage will change over time, like in terms of, you know, you grow older, right? Like you're not as sexy anymore. You start having kids, that changes things. Your dynamics will sometimes change. But the foundational part of it is that you have two people who are trying to, in some ways, work out this thing called life together, because understanding that family is wealth, and the more stronger your family is, the more you can get through the trials and tribulations of life. When you're alone, when you're an individual, you're completely dependent upon the state. Like this is the big lie, right? No one is an individual. No one. You are a representative of a collective action of humanity that has led to you, right? So when you think you can stand alone and do this stuff, maybe some people can, and you'll go full Uncle Ted and go live in a cabin out in the woods and write a manifesto. I don't know, whatever you want to do, man. But for the rest of us, well, we live. You know, the old quote: "We live in a society." Yeah, the society is a collective. I'm not saying we have to be collectivist and we have to join a commune, but it's just what it is, right? I'm just calling it what it is. And the only way that this civilization capital thing works is if we work together, right? We take our human capital, we take a little bit of our sovereignty, our personal sovereignty, we invest it into things that are bigger than us, and that thing will become bigger and bigger and bigger. And the question is, like, why? Because it's what we do. We're builders. It's what we do. We don't. It's you don't have to answer it even. It's a Meshuggah question, like whatever, right? Like we do these things because there's value in the doing. There's a quote by Joseph Conrad, and I'll just paraphrase it. Is something that goes along the lines of like, I don't like work no man does, but I like what I can find in work. I like the essence of work itself is satisfying. There's meaning within it, and that's what you're getting from it. With marriage, that's what you get from it. I get meaning every day. There's a purpose for me. You know, my purpose is my family. I have a role. I substantiate that role. I carry it forward. I model it for my child. I model it for my wife. Right? Like you keep these things together, and you get bigger and better and more competent. Not just for your own self-satisfaction, but for the cool things you can do for the family, and for the role you can fulfill. But that takes a certain mindset. It's a grind set. You know, if you think you can do this by yourself, you can't. You just can't. It's impossible. So,
I mean, all right. So,
I think that's part. Yeah, sorry. That's why I think why people are responding so well to this idea, and as we introduce more and more actual things about this into the world as we go forward, and there's work behind the scenes. I won't say too much about it, but hopefully by the end of the year we'll be able to present a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like, so
it's
right, but here's the thing, and this is kind of important, right? Is that this idea of all of us working together is great if it benefits us, right?
Well, of
That's the
course.
problem, right? And so the back end of it is so we have to get the fundamentals proper, right? Like the town, community, family structure that has to be put back into a proper place. And what I've come up with at this point is I think the only way to do it is to have like local food grower, right? Where
Sure.
you have to like stand here and have some type of you're responsible and you have to go outside and you have to go touch grass and you have to grow things for yourself, right? And
Hmm.
we eliminate like these large like transportation logistics like things for like our basic food supplies. You need local greenhouses, you need local people doing local things, and then you have that purpose of like why like this is benefiting me. Why? Because like now I have local food, I have a wife and she needs to be able to like stay home and grow this food and be able to like help provide for the whole community, and everybody's working together to do these things. And then like you have to build upwards from that structure. You can't like we can't just go like, yeah, we have to work together as a thing and build civilizational capital if you're just going to continue to like rape our
Oh
human.
yeah, no, that's why I say like you have to get a tribe together,
Yeah,
right? And you can, and all the members of that tribe. I don't think there's a definite number for it, but you need to be able. Then you can police that tribe really easy. If you start to see someone wigging out or becoming a bit of a problem, out you go, buddy. Right? Like you can set your own rules and parameters of these things. Like my goal is to get a white paper together, amongst other things, and be able to present it to people and go, here, this is how I think you should do it. Like here's how it's done, right? Here's the almost mathematical formula for it in a sense. Um, and then you can plug in whatever you want. If you're hung up on the Christian thing, okay, do it with your own, I don't know, whatever, right? Try it, see if it happens. What Matt and I are really talking about, as like, let's say, phase one or one of the early phases, is you build it online because we have this thing and we're international. Like I'm a Canadian living in Australia. I'm talking to you, Tom, and TK's here. Like you guys are in America. Like we're not geographically uh, centered anymore, but we can be centered in terms of principle, and we can be centered in terms of investment. So we start this thing online. We build the online tribe, and we start to build an online uh, town. Um, and as that begins to develop, and we're building more and more capital that we can invest, the alchemical trick is to take that online town and structure and produce it in real life in meat space. And then you've already tested it out and you already have your test people and all that stuff that you can move from there to here, and you can buy it up, and then you start developing from there, right? That's what the that whole statement, and I know sometimes can be contentious for people, but you don't live in a civilization more is very, very important to get in your head. And don't start doing the the tribal thing where it's like you start negotiating, well, this and that, who knows what. No, it's no. You don't. You're a zero. We got to get to one, right? Like get that clear in your head.
yeah,
Because if you start thinking you're a five when you're a zero, you're fucked.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
you're
There's a
fucked.
massive problem. Like one
Right.
of the reasons like I still do this, even though like my channel's demonetized and I mean, like, you'd be burying me, all that type of stuff, is every once in a while, like, I'll reach somebody, I mean, they'll really change things. My buddy Mike, what he started doing is he's taking federal grants and in his community in the Ozarks, he's like rebuilding like river banks and I mean, like teaching people how to like have proper river safety for the kids and building institutions. And he took my ideas and going like community, family, I mean, all this stuff like purpose, reason, like having a culture and building something that's bigger than you, what I mean? And all these things. He took this and he applied it, right? And now he's changing lives. And
That's
I
it.
think that's amazing. You know what I mean?
What's crazy to me is that people hear this and their first reaction is it can never work. I'm like, it's worked for hundreds of thousands of years. What are you talking about? Like I'm literally just detailing the thing that has always happened. Like that'd be like saying it's not going to become winter in winter. Like what? Right? That's stupid. The other thing too is that what we've been one of the biggest crises we're having right now is that people don't have anything to invest in. It's not that they don't have human capital or skill or intelligence. I don't think people are stupid. I think most people are boring, and they're just and they're part of the one of the reasons why they're boring is they have no sense of awe. Like, what is bigger than you? You know, if you're an atheist, you're taking all of creation on your shoulders all the time. You are the moral arbiter and agent in this world. It's too much. Like, you can't do it. It's going to drive you crazy. Uh, the same thing if you're this hyper individualist living in civilization. It's like, well, you can't be this because it's again too much. It's too much responsibility for you. You have to work together with people and combine this human capital to do stuff. And I think even starting very humbly, like you beginning to build a town, right? Because that's at least a building block. Well, I think a town is doable for most people. Most, I live in a town right now. It's not that complicated. You can set up the structure, I think, pretty easily, and with far less financial investment than it would take to build a city. And cities have their own problems, and like we're going to avoid those problems and just concentrate on town problems first, and then build it out, right? And I think for people like us who are more on the ground level of things, where sometimes we don't have two coins to rub together, starting at something that's more actionable and that you can envision in your head really clearly, that's the key, right? It's to create a desire for order, and then we begin to materialize the order in the world, whether it be online or in meat space. And as we keep doing that, then you start to develop more and more of this capital, and we keep creating things for you to invest it in that are worthy, that are, like you said, that are of the human, of us, right? That serve us, and elevate us and transcend us, not past humanity, but transcend us towards God, towards this idea of the city of God or the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah, I mean,
And
like I was telling people, like I was living up in the mountains. I had to come back down to the city, and I'm going back up to the mountains here in a few months. But when I was up in the mountains, what I did is my next door neighbor, he was an EMT and a firefighter, right? And here they're all volunteers, you know what I'm saying? So like they don't get paid. And this guy, like, I want him to be an EMT and a firefighter. And the borough's over here sending him like letters about, like trashing his yard or whatever it is, and needs to cut his grass. And he don't have time because he's working a full-time job. He's fighting fires. He's saving people's lives, all this stuff. I take my weekends and I go and I clean his fucking yard up. Basic.
Civil fucking frame.
Basic.
I have a park right across the street from my house, right?
Right.
And my daughter, I take my daughter to ride her little bike and walk around and stuff. And I do this with her. We just like pick up random pieces of garbage and put it in the bin. And I was saying this to someone who was like, "Oh, well, you really need to call the council. The council needs to do that." I'm like, "Yeah, okay. I could call the council, and you're right, like on some level, but also the garbage is right there. I'm right here. I can spend it down, pick it up, and put it in the garbage, and then my environment is nicer, and I have fixed it because I see a problem. I fix the problem because I live in a civil frame. Like, why do I have to upload this to someone else? Like, if it's beyond my capability, sure, but I can bend down and pick up garbage. Like, it's not, I think it's, again, that idea of like, you got to get humble. You got to stay, get humble, be useful, and stay grateful. And if you have those three things kind of operating in your head all the time, a lot of these things you just do. Like, just do it. Like you said, that's perfect. That's a great thing. You want someone to be able to have more time, to be able to concentrate on the things that that's going to be worthwhile to you and your community. Because when you need an EMT or something like that, like that's more important than in a grand scheme of like potential problems solving than you spending a little bit extra time helping him out and keeping his place nice, which is good for his psyche. Like, that's perfect, man. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
This is what I'm saying. Right? And these are the examples that I bring out, right? And you want to, like, if you want things to be better, you have to be better. You have to be willing to put the work in. You gotta go do it. You know what I mean? You can't stand here and expect everybody else to just keep doing things for you or doing things for like the family, the community, and all the things that you want. You have to do it. Be the example, be the person to change things, be the person that gets that first step going. So when, when you're standing here and, you can like even something as little as like you have a local pizza shop or like a local, like little community, little family diner, whatever, right? Leave them a good review on Google, like something basic, like get the fucking ball rolling. You know what I mean? Like help your local community build things locally. Like that's how you do it. You're not gonna be able to defeat the federal government and all the nonsense or whatever it is. And if you want a place that's like worth living in, you have to be willing to put the work in to get it done.
Well,
It's never, sorry.
yeah, another part of this is definitely that, like, you were saying that a lot of people say, can you actually do this type of thing? And probably a better question is, how long can you keep living hand to mouth
Mm-hmm.
before a bad winter comes, before a recession comes, before something like this happens? About what, half of America is living paycheck to paycheck right now? Is it
80%.
Yeah. Is it more realistic to keep doing that indefinitely, or is it more realistic to like plant a garden in your backyard?
I'll give you a personal example, right? So COVID's happening. In Montreal, there's lockdowns. My family out in Canada, like there's like two of my family members, like direct my family members left. My wife comes from a big family out here in Australia. We were going into second lockdown, and I was looking around. My daughter had just been born, and I just did a sort of an inventory, kind of a sit rep there because I had nothing else to do but think. And I just realized like we're incredibly vulnerable. Like I've got a few friends here who could help out if things go wrong, but like I got no big family unit. Like my mom and my aunt will be gone probably in the next 5-10 years. So what happens then, right? Like so that was a huge part of the decision to move here to Australia to be closer to my wife's much larger family because and at the time there wasn't lockdowns and all these other good things about it but it was just that realization like family is wealth. Like if it doesn't matter if I fall on bad times, right, or my wife does, or my family, my household does, there's other people who because of blood relation will help in whatever capacity they can. That's again, this is the idea of joining human capital. Now we haven't formalized or anything like we're not living in a longhouse or something like that, but we all half of us live, half of her family, my family too, I guess, live in the same area. She's growing. My daughter's getting to grow up with her cousins. It's we just had my wife's grandmother just celebrated 90th birthday, and we all got together like a huge like a clan and and had that birthday celebration. There's a wedding in a few weeks that's going to be again the same thing. Like this is what this is. So you got to have family, or you have to have this tribe essentially that you can tap into, because like you said, if you're hand to mouth, man, if you're in a primal frame and everything's here, one bad winter and you're screwed. You've like a lot of this thing started when I in late 2019. I was working in a bar and I was hanging up Christmas decorations, and I fell off the bar and put my hand through the back bar and like almost sliced my hand off. And that started this whole. And then COVID happened and a whole bunch of other stuff, and that made me understand how freaking vulnerable I was. Like I was just living, putting money away, doing my thing, and everything's good. But then it's like, oh shit, like that can happen like that. I'm in my mid 40s. I'm in that zone where you just wake up dead some days. Right? Like you just, we're walking down the street, heart attack, you're done. What happens to my family then? What you got to think of these things. These things have to be an action plan. And I don't think it's a good idea to just start thinking about it when you're 40. Think about it when you're 20. Think about it when you're 15. Think about it when you're 7 or 8, in whatever capacity you can. What are you part of? How are you going to sustain this thing? What is your role in this? How do you maximize that role? How do you, go up the hierarchy? How do you assume certain new responsibilities and titles within your family or within your society or culture. These things aren't going away. These things are fundamental. They can be suspended, they can be screwed with, they can be a lot of things can be done with it. But we're going to be returning to we're returning to it really quickly. And we'll see what the 2024 does and all that stuff. But no matter what, even if we win, and things get better, we still don't live in a civilization anymore. And we still need to build it. And I think that's the
Yeah, I mean, like I oftentimes like I try to discuss things about like the definitions of like words, and the three of them that like I think people get messed up the most is state, nation, and country, right? Like because like your state is a government, right? Your nation is the people, and the country is a geographic region. And I 100% believe in like we don't live in a nation. We don't have a nation of people, right? Like there we don't have like these cultural ties, these shared values, these ideas, these things that really make us into being a nation.
the
Like
ratio, yeah.
yeah, it's not there, right? And I think that's my large problem, and one of the reasons is because like our leaders have squandered the civilizational capital of us as a people over time. They've just squandered it over and over and over again instead of going, yeah, no, you're not going to stand here and what I mean, like you're not going to sit here and just destroy the communities that you're going into. You're not going to sit here and take advantage of people and leave them high and dry and then not have them have any recourse or any way to be able to earn a living, or have the families just end up completely dilapidated. We're not going to do that. Economics is not more important than I mean the human beings who fucking live here. And that's one of those big things. Like they went and they like Vietnam was another really good example. Oh, we're going to go and like have a whole bunch of our people die, right? In our nation, we're gonna squander the capital over what?
Shipping lanes.
Right? Like over what? Like how does
Shipping
this
lanes.
help us? You know what I mean? And these are
Well, I
the
mean,
big
do
things.
you like ships? What do you have against boats? Come on, boats are nice.
Look, I like boats as much as the next guy.
They get to
Right?
go.
I
They
do.
get to go the whole thing without getting
Yeah, I
molested.
mean,
It's nice.
like without boats, I mean, how will we be able to get our cheap plastic things from I mean,
Of course.
Asian countries?
Yeah, come on. You're gonna build it in America? You're crazy.
Like, why do we need jobs? We don't need that. It's not.
Liberate yourself past jobs, man. Liberate yourself past the market. Come on, just liberate
Yeah,
yourself.
hey, look, just invest. All right, we need to like go buy Bitcoin, and get you some of them bobblehead things that everybody likes.
Hey, man, you know what? Honestly, if you had the choice between like just being a consumer or an investor, at least be an investor. Like at least that has some potential benefit. Being a mindless, never-ending consumer is just that's how you get into the coom pod. That's how you live in the pod and eat the bugs. Like because you won't have any reason not to. It'll be just like, oh, I guess we're doing this thing now.
Yeah, I still don't like the idea of investment. I just, at least in the modern sense of like the market and stuff, I think you should be invested like locally in your household, and your community, and all
Sure.
these type of things.
That's
In
still
in
investment.
in knowing things, you know what I mean? Right. Like and people say like you're doing poor wrong, right? Like you're like when people are poor, the reason why they stay poor for the most part, they have such a hard time is they do it wrong. They're not willing to put the work in, right? They don't get up and go clean the gutters on their fucking house. They don't sit here and be able to fix their car. They're not able to do all these type of things. And these are also things that 100% we need to get back to, right? We really have to get back to like an idea of you and your family working together to be able to get through some of this harder shit, so you're not completely ass out every time something happens, and you have to take like your vehicle, your transportation to a shop and pay $2,000 to get something fixed that you don't have, and you just in perpetual debt. These are things that like I think about quite often, and it all goes back to like we don't have you're right. We don't have a civilization. We don't have a nation. We don't have a people who actually care about us. Our government don't give a fuck in any way whatsoever about the humans who live here.
Well, they're getting because they're differentiating themselves. This is the thing with the regio, right? The nice thing with the regio is, when you're living in a civilization that has a strong one, then the differences become other civilizations, right? So that's the us and them. The thems are the other civilizations. The us is together, right? When you lose that regio, suddenly the us and them become you and me. Girard has talked about this too. It's the idea that, and this is what comes down to the scapegoat mechanism, is that as the more similar people are, the more the more rivals they will become. They'll start wanting the same stuff, and the more they want the same stuff, the more they will compete for that stuff, and then that creates these rivalries of going, like, if someone has more than you, suddenly it's not because they've worked harder or maybe they're better at something or whatever have you. No, it's because they cheated. Oh no, it's because they're up to no good somewhere. They're a bad person somewhere. They get labeled bad. You can see examples of this everywhere. And by creating that rivalry, it increases the chances of violence. And again, violence doesn't have to be kinetic. It can be mimetic. It can just be like aggressions towards people, if you want to put it that way. As that grows and grows, it starts to become a sort of totalizing violence where it's all against all. And that's usually where societies in the past have looked for the scapegoat, one scapegoat. They find some guy or some person, or whatever, institution, group, put all the blame on them and say that the reason why everything's bad is because of this. And if we get rid of this, we sacrifice this group, person, whatever, then things will get better. And they do that, and then things get better because all of a sudden that mimetic energy, that rivalry dissipates for the time being. And people feel like everything's better. They still have all the problems, but they kind of take a few steps back, and then the process starts again. So we're kind of in that position where now we're getting into all against all, where again everyone thinks they're an individual, so they don't have any responsibility to each other, to even their own family, which is the craziest thing. Because now, again, in that liberation kind of motif, is that you are liberating yourself past your own history. And there's there's just these things where you can't, like, it's not possible other than if you go completely, totally insane. So this is kind of where we're starting to see this thing collapse, because you can't make rational decisions. Planes are falling from the sky because you've lost rationality. Like, you've lost competency. People are just ducking out. Boeing just released a really pretty troubling thing, because they don't have any engineers. They had to change their retirement packaging because of inflation, and a lot of engineers were looking at that going, hey, that's going to negatively affect my retirement, so I'm taking early retirement. So they lost something like a third or 2/3 of their engineering division. Like, they're an aircraft company. They really depend on engineers to make the aircraft go.
They don't need engineers, man. They don't need them. Listen, they just need more, they need their stock price to go up. They're just going to buy back more of their own stock, right? And it'll all work. Okay.
That's where we're at.
They don't need R&D.
Because again, it's not this idea of investment, right? Investment back into the people, investment back into your business, into your workers. It's a critical failure. And it's pretty troubling. So, that's what I'm saying is, if we want to say investment, like, okay, let's get away from the Peter Thiels and the big guys, Elon Musk's. If you just want to think of investment in terms of like what you give your time and attention to, who you give your care to, how you maintain something, how you build and maintain it over time, that's investment. It's an investment of time, energy, and resources into something that you recognize gives you something back that isn't necessarily material. Bridges that the Romans built that are over 1,000 years old, that are maintained in Spain. That's that's a deliberate investment of human resources, of human capital. Like, you have to maintain that bridge over time for thousands of years. That's not nothing, right? And the reason they do it isn't because it couldn't build another bridge or even maybe build a better bridge, right? Is that Roman bridge gives them a sense of history, gives them a sense of callback to culture, to an identity, to a regio, and they keep it because it's giving them that rub. It creates that vibe that all civilizations need, because civilizations essentially are irrational things when it comes right down to it. Externally, they look silly. Like, why are you doing all this stuff? Internally, it's because we need to, because that's what substantiates the civilization. Like, it's hard. it's hard from within the frame to answer the question. You're like, well, of course we have big giant buildings. Like that's what we do. What do you mean? Like, that's how we do it.
It's impossible to prove a foundational assumption from within the system that it defines.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, especially when it's something like vibe. You know, it's just you know when you have it, and you know when you don't have it, and I think people are waking up to knowing it when they're losing it. So
I mean, you can't rationalize away everything. You know what I mean? That's what like a lot of liberals try to do. They're like, hey, look, well, why are we doing these things? It's like, well, because like this is what keeps us foundationally in order as a people, right? This is what binds us together. This is what brings our families together, what brings our communities together. But they're like, yeah, but it doesn't make any rational sense. And I'm like, it don't have to. You just do shit. You know what I mean? Like, and this is where like the whole like cultures are built off of, like geography. So like you have your harvest festival and then a religion comes through or you might form a religion of your own, whether it be, like multi-god, pole, like paganist, or it could be Christianity. It all fits over top of and like solidifies your shit that you already have. Like all of a sudden your harvest festival now it'll have Catholic or Christian or Orthodox tones to it. It'll have these type of celebrations and it'll like solidify all these things. But the moment you get rid of that religion and you get rid of the culture and the underlying geographic basis for it, like, and this is an idea that I've been thinking about and working it out in my head as I go. Basically, when you have that culture and you have those celebrations and those traditions and all our ceremonies, right, that come from that culture, when you move away from like that geographic basis, because we're all living in like boxes or pods or whatever the case is, you end up having like people go back and they're trying to find that culture now. And I'm finding a lot of people are going back to Christianity because that's what maintained the culture, but that's not the culture itself.
Well, it can be.
But
I mean, it's actually no, it is. For example, in Orthodox Christianity, I think a lot of people are discovering Orthodox Christianity and becoming Orthodox. Yeah. Because Orthodoxy, okay, so and people who haven't experienced this or gotten too deep into this, I won't get into a big theological thing, and I need to wrap this up to get my daughter ready for stuff. But so in Orthodoxy, there's a term called phronema. A phronema is a worldview, essentially, right? But a phronema instructs you in all things. It's totalizing. So you don't just with for example with Orthodoxy, I'll give you a really easy example. Is we're going into Great Lent. Starts on March 18th, goes to May 4th, where we do a lot of fasting and prayer, almsgiving. There's a whole bunch of rituals associated with it. The whole part of it is to mimic or model the Gospels, like Christ's journey, his 40 days in Jerusalem, resulting in the death and resurrection. During that time period, your whole purpose as an Orthodox Christian, in reverence to this of Great Lent, is to be thinking and acting in a godly way, right, in a Christ-like way, as much as you can, like to maximize that in every element of your life, from prayer to your thinking, your doing, your conceptualizing. It's all there. Now, this is just one big long ritual, and that's not some people go, well, you don't do that all the time. It's like, yeah, but you're supposed to. Like, you're supposed to. The phronema is that all things in life are representative in the Orthodox religion, and we have 2,000 years of tradition to prove that. Now, do people screw it up? Yes. Do people go astray? Absolutely. Is it perfect? Are people perfect, or can people become perfect through this? Well, that's debatable. But the idea, it's not an ideal. It's not an ideology. It's a everyday and every way way of being, And the more orthodox you can become, like people have asked me, like, well, what's your political thing? I'm like, I'm I m- I want to become orthodox. Like I want to be orthodox in all my ways, right? So once you get to this point, I'm very white belt. So that's why I try not to get too heavy with things. Father John Whiteford will be on my show on March 15th. He's an Orthodox priest, an American father. We'll be talking more and more about this, but especially around Great Lent. But this, the idea of of living the ritual every day, right? So it's not just a culture, or it's all the things. Like everything you do and you build revolves around this. We're going to start seeing this in Russia. So if you want to see how this is going to play out, keep an eye on Russia over the next 40, 50 years. They have gone back. Putin has declared it as an Orthodox Christian country, and they are going to increasingly become more and more Orthodox, because as you begin to substantiate this, it's not just we go to church on Sunday or we say some prayers. It's like you're doing it all the time. Like as I'm sitting here and talking to you, I'm doing a Jesus prayer in my head, right? Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on the sinner. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on the sinner. I do this all the time, right? And it reminds you of your status, of where you are. You are a sinner, and it's a way of receiving grace, and you're doing it all the time. Or I do it all the time, right? That's the difference between Orthodox Christianity and most Christianity that you've probably encountered. And if you take it seriously enough, you live it.
All
If
right.
you live
I mean,
it,
okay. All right. So
Can I
here's
do a real
the
quick point
yeah,
here?
yeah.
You're not wrong, but you're missing kind of part of the angle that he's coming in on. Just as an example, like I haven't been catechized or anything like this, but I go to a Orthodox parish, and it's got a lot of Lebanese influence, and so there's a lot of cultural trappings from Lebanon that get associated with the church. Like it's very common that even unrelated people in the church, like if you're an older dude and you're unmarried, younger people just call you uncle, this type of thing.
Mhm.
That isn't necessarily inherent into orthodoxy, right? That is a fusion of the Orthodox Christian practices with the inherited cultural practices of the region that then spread out
Sure.
with that.
I would say this is that, and then maybe this is the disconnect. I don't. For me, low level culture stuff like I'm Ukrainian. My family's a Ukrainian Polish, right? With my birth father's French Canadian, so I'm raised in French Canadian culture, all that stuff. The 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 easily accessible things like foods and I understand their importance, and they have a primacy in a lot of those things. That's how people access it. But to me, a culture is much bigger than just that, right? It's a literal uh, how do we say this? It's it's a it's a historic sense of identity that is communicable only really within people who are of that culture. You get it only when you get it, right? Like foreigners can appreciate it, and that's why like a lot of people like can move to a country. Like I'm Canadian moving to Australia. A lot of similarities, a lot of differences. I will never be Australian. I'm not even trying. I don't care, right? Like I'm beyond it. But in terms of culture, like overall meta culture, well, that's something I can be part of, because in my mind, like civilization is a culture unto itself. Um, Anything where people are collectively doing things towards a greater goal, that is a culture in my mind, right? And maybe I'm making distinctions where distinctions don't be made, but in terms of orthodoxy, there is the church that we are all taking part in, and then there's you're Lebanese, I'm Polish, Ukrainian, we have our little things, but the liturgy stays the same. the rituals stay the same. If you're not doing that, then there's a problem, right? That's the big thing that Orthodox Christianity, I think, especially for Western converts, throws them off guard because they're used to like going to Pastor Jim, and Pastor Jim has his take on things, and or you go to now it's Pastor Mary probably, and she has her thing, whatever, right? No, in Orthodoxy, like the meat and bones, the thing that is Orthodoxy, let's say the liturgy, that remains the same. It's unchangeable, and that gives you that sense of who you are.
I do agree,
it's not
but
just that.
to
It's
your
like, all right, so
now and throughout history.
Yeah, TK. All right, so like, check us out. So TK here soon is going to be going to a bonfire, right? His local community, right? Your how do I put this? Your culture as a whole has practices in it, right? That you do when you're a kid. You're a teenager. You go and I don't know, you go to like the lovers lane or whatever with your female or some shit. You go into the woods or you're hanging out at the mall, whatever it is, right? You have these cultural like practices that everybody pretty much does. We don't really have that as much in the US anymore because they're very different and everybody's out here playing, SOCOM or whatever PlayStation game that they're playing, Call of Duty. Are the cultural practices, like these physical manifestations of how you live geographically every day, are kind of what actually holds you in place with things like culture and religion and values, right? Because as you practice them, like every day, you're reminded this is what we are, right? And that's the stuff that you pass down to your kids as well. And so this this idea of like the religion actually, like, it solidifies all these things. It takes them and it ceremonializes them, right? Where it goes like, all right, well, you're going to have your harvest festival like Thanksgiving or whatever the case is, Halloween, and that's now going to be inundated with all the religious like accoutrement that came from your religion, right? But like that harvest is still there. Like, if you take away the religion, the harvest still exists. You switch religion, the harvest still exists. Like, all these things will stay there forever because you're going to keep, like, as long as you live in that place and you grow that food and you have to eat because you're a human and we have to eat, right? Like, that will stay.
But
and that harvest festival will stay.
But the
Lent
desire
in
to be,
Louisiana is an entirely different thing.
I would imagine.
Right. And this is what I'm saying about the cultural thing, right? So like these type of things that are physical every day, like, so if you're a fisherman, you go make your living fishing, right? I mean, if you're religious and you're fishing, like, you're going to end up having that, like, your whatever religion you are. If you're Orthodox or if you're Protestant or whatever it is, you're going to say prayers before you go out. You're going to say a prayer to catch the fish. You're going to say a prayer. You're going to give thanks when the fish comes in. You're going to give thanks when you sell your fish at the market, all these type of things. But like, everybody's reaching for the religion. They're not reaching for the fish is the problem.
Yeah. I don't see these things as two separate things anymore. In terms of, if left alone to their own devices, I think human beings become very selfish. This is part of living in a fallen world. You'll take care of you and yours above all else. And then, I think that's not necessarily a horrible thing. But in terms of wanting to work together and doing something, like you're saying that, if you take away the religion, you'll still have the harvest festival. I don't think you do. You might still have a harvest in terms of people will still be making food so they can eat. But this idea of common sharing, of community, of let's all get together, let's all pool our food together and share our food, which is what harvest festivals used to be or were for a long time. That won't exist without religion. Religion substantiates a few things. One of the big ones is taboos. What things aren't, what you are not to do. But there's also a lot of things of a lot of positivism, like what we shall do, right? How do we ritualize? How do we give thanks? All these concepts are only born out of religion. Here's an interesting point, and maybe we'll end on this because I really do have to go. Again, back to René Girard. René Girard posits a claim that Christ, the death and resurrection story of Christ, breaks both the scapegoat mechanism, as he puts it, it also breaks mythology. Because there had never been a story like that, nor has there ever been a story since that. And one of the key parts of it is there had never been the concept of the innocent victim. Before that, in history, in all religions and all myth and stuff like that, there was no such thing as an innocent victim. Everyone kind of got what was coming to them. You know, they deserved it on some level. They did a thing. Oedipus did kill his father and sleep with his mother, right? Whether he knew about it or not. Like, these things are always in story form, like concrete. Christ is the first time where you have this idea of a perfectly innocent victim, and we know he's innocent because we follow his entire trajectory, so we understand not only is he God and without sin, but like his entire story. Like, even I was a devout atheist and anti-theist, you know, Chris Hitchens, all the rest of them all had to say was like, well, you know, Christ is a pretty good guy, whether you just think he's a character in a story, like pretty perfect, right? That breaks things. That changed things completely. It changed the idea. It stopped human sacrifice. When any civilization that encountered Christianity stopped human sacrifice within a generation or two. Even the Norse, you know, those dams, those wonderful Swedes and you know, people in Norway used to eat people until they encountered Christianity, and then they stopped eating people. So it's bigger than that, right? It's, again, if you're only looking at religion as a story or as a mechanism or as a thing you can create and reproduce, I mean, you can probably try to do that. I think that's what wokeism and a lot of the other things are trying to do. But even within wokeism is this idea of the victim, right? It's like this inversion of the Christ model. But that's why it's falling apart, because we are to model Christ, we are to work towards him with realization that we will never be him. And this always, that proximal zone of development that we teach about kids, that's your increase, and that's how you start to live more and more like him. You level up, you become more. You're trying to be more Christ competent. You're trying to increase your Christ capital by moving towards him or being pulled towards him. That's why you don't have certain things without it, right? I'm not saying there wasn't harvest festivals before Christ. I'm sure there were, or whatever, right? But in terms of holding societies together, that regio, that binding agent, yeah, you need a religion, whether it be a civic or.
I agree.
Or,
You need a religion, right? Like,
without
religion,
it, you don't have a harvest festival.
No. All right, so you will have a harvest festival without the religion, right? You will have.
Well,
You will
how?
have.
There's never been a time without religion, ever.
I mean,
The Romans had civic religions. The Greeks had civic religions. So it's religion.
Yeah.
I'm saying that Christianity allows you to scale bigger, but in terms of you can become you can actually have a global religion with Christianity. You couldn't do that with Pantheon with the Pantheon. It never worked. But I'm saying is that you need that religion. You take the religion out, all the other things that bind people together and make people actually want to work together, that goes away too. Like,
all right.
So
let me say this, right? I'm not concerned with globally human beings working together, right? That's why, like, I don't really care about like space travel, all that. Oh, we're gonna go to Mars and, you know, building like moon glues and all these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where my problem comes down to. So, like, I'm saying that at a fundamental level, we have to like get back to basics, right? You know, get back to like, you know, building proper communities, proper family, proper nations, right? Like actual nations that like can exist geographically in a space that aren't just some idea. Like, America is a nation of an idea of like freedom and liberalism and all these type of things. That's not a nation. That only works if you continually have people getting like more successful and more wealth and all these type. You're able to like ply them with this, right? Because once things start getting bad, all of a sudden, then you turn back to like, oh, we need people, right? We need other human beings to be around, and then you start pulling back from that liberal ideology because in order to be around other people and work with other people, you have to make sacrifices. You have to tell them they can't just be free. You can't just do whatever you want, you know what I mean? Just run around being wild all the time and doing nonsense, right? And that's anti-liberal, Right?
I mean,
That's where it comes down. You know what I mean?
This is why the libertarians don't like any of this shit.
Yeah, right.
You can't even have. It's why that stuff never is dead in the water anyways. Because it's like, okay, you want to privatize military? How? Like, okay, you want to privatize the security force? How? What if no one in your little Ancapistan group wants to be a security guy, or you get like 2, right? Okay, well you're fucked. Like, because me and my much bigger private security group is going to come over and take your shit, and you're going to say the nap, and I'm going to go, I don't fucking care, and do my thing, right?
Yeah.
If I'm so motivated to do so. So yeah, it's
right. But this whole idea,
let's not
getting back to like the premises of, you have to have reasons for people to do shit. It can't just be like, oh, this book says, I mean, that you're supposed to do this. Okay, this book says this, but every day I have to make a decision about I need to eat and whether or not I should commit usury to be able to do so. You know what I mean? Like these type of things are very, very like difficult to sell to the average human being who doesn't have that, oh, all right, so why am I not doing this? Well, because like if I do this, all of a sudden the community I'm around who I'm relying upon aren't going to want to work with me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? These are the premises that you have to get back to, because that's what holds, like, that's the glue, right? That's that nation, that community, that's that common shared, like, work together thing, right? You have to have that. And we don't have that as a people because we think that, like, it's just, oh, we go to church every week or whatever it is, and we're all just going to be Christians. And that's just not the answer. The answer, you have to get back. We have to get back to, this is why we do this. We like these practices that we do every day, right? Not just, like I'm praying because I want to pray, because like, I'm doing this because I am religious. You're doing this because you have to go fishing every day to eat. And then like you want to have like the best chance of like catching a fish, and whether that is, like I'm gonna use a good bait, or I have like a higher power on my side to like get that fish.
Have both. Line. I'm just saying, have both.
Exactly. That's the point. You want both.
And here's the thing I would say to me, from over 10 years ago, is like, look, even if you want to believe that this thing is just a psychological trick, right? That it's all right. It's not mystical. There's no God or whatever. That's fine. Even if it's just like a little mimetic trick in your brain that makes you just a little bit better, like, it's the energy drink for the soul. Do it. Like, just do it. It costs you nothing, but in my experience, it's a humongous boon. So whatever. I don't know.
Well, I agree.
This is why I don't preach, man. Well, it's always at the end of the day.
No, I'm fine with the preaching thing, right? Like I'm fine with that. But like this whole like thing is where I go, all right, well, what if every female in your community, like they actually had to like, pluck chickens, or everybody like grew eggs, everybody had eggs, everybody had tomatoes, everybody had stuff out back, right? And all of a sudden these become cultural practices in your community. This is what you're taking pride in, the size of like, your tomatoes you're growing, your cucumbers, whatever. Right now you're having like these, everybody gets together, like once a week or once every month or whatever. We have a market where we all get together and we compare wares and goods, and people have little celebrations, and you hang out, you spend time with other people. These
don't be ashamed to be a redneck. Don't be ashamed to be a redneck.
I'm a hillbilly, bro. I'm an Appalachian.
Sorry, hillbilly. Sorry.
Get my pronouns proper, right? Like, yeah, right. So like this is where it is. So like these type of practices are what really actually build proper cultures, right? And then the religion on the other side of that, right? The religion gets held in place because you have this every day. This is what you're doing every day in your community. Everybody is, working towards the same end. That's the baseline of it. And then the religion is the glue that holds it all together, and then keeps it moving forward, and keeps it being like promoted. Like you have celebrations where like when children are born, and you go, oh man, it's a new member of our community. It's a new person who's going to be making tomatoes or whatever it is. And then you have things that you can pass down and move forward with that are important. That's the mentality.
100%.
That's where my mental is. It's like you have to have the foundation.
It's the grind set, man. That's why I'm saying you need all these things have to be in place. You need a social, economic, and political domain to invest your human capital in, or you need to be developing them. And those things, those domains are held together by a regio, which is a region, leadership, a king, and classically a king, and a religion, you know. And you need those three things are necessary to bind a people together. At whatever stage of civilization you're at, you need those things, and those things have got to be. You got to make those as strong and as wealthy as possible. And again, we're not talking like money necessarily. That's a component, but you can be a very powerful nation and not have the most, not be the richest nation. There's tons of really good examples of civilizations who are doing just fine, or could, have been doing fine throughout history. Then they weren't making as much as the United States, but they have a healthy, flourishing civilization that takes care of its people. And that's what we're aiming for. That's the project. So anyone listening to this, come subscribe, put the notification bell on, go check out that Civilization patchwork reading series. We'll be doing more with Matt next week. Yes, yeah, next week. And I thank you guys. Sorry, I got a jet.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
But honestly, man, thanks. If we have any disagreements, man, like I always like having a little bit of like back and forth, like a little tension when because in the moment I'm going to double down and be like, no, I'm right, you're wrong, right? But always what happens with me is like I'm obsessive, so I'll go away from this and I'll be like churning on ideas, right? And maybe going, oh yeah, okay, maybe he had a point there, okay, right? And and augments things. So I always thank you, brother.
Like I'm an East Coast guy. My family's from Calabria, Italy, right? So like just iron sharpens iron all the time. This is how we operate.
That's it, man. Yeah. I'm Eastern European is like,
it's really appreciated you coming on and having a conversation with me and explaining this and breaking this stuff down. It's awesome, man. I'm a big fan of what you're doing. You know what I mean? I'll be promoting your stuff and working on this, and I've been running around banging out this idea myself. So, all right, everybody, man, listen, y'all like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you go over check out his channel. Listen, we'll be back probably tomorrow with some more stuff for y'all. All right, I'm up out of here. Peace. Be like one.